You ever wake up in the morning and even though your body got a full night's rest, something just doesn't feel right? You're not in pain, you're not sick, but there's this heavy fog hanging over everything. Conversations feel like work. Making decisions feels like lifting weights. And even the simplest things, like picking out your clothes or answering the phone, suddenly feel like too much. I've been there, and I'll tell you something most folks don't say out loud. Sometimes it's not your body that's tired, it's your mind. And when you're over 65, especially living alone or dealing with years of stress, this kind of mental fatigue can creep up without you even noticing. Today on Elderly Reflections, I want to share with you 3 signs that you might be mentally tired. Not just physically. These signs aren't meant to scare you. They're meant to help you catch what's really going on before it turns into something bigger. If you care about senior health, about staying sharp, independent, and emotionally balanced after 60, this one's for you. So stick with me. And hey, before we dive in, if you're someone who believes in elderly wisdom, in learning from life lessons the hard way, go ahead and subscribe. Turn on the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. All right, let's talk. You know, the older I get, the more I realize that not all exhaustion is physical. Sometimes the deepest tiredness doesn't come from the legs or the back. It comes from the mind. And the problem is, most people don't see it coming. We ignore it, brush it off, call it just aging. But in my years of sitting with seniors from all walks of life, nurses, farmers, retired engineers, even war veterans, I've seen the same patterns show up over and over again. And today I want to talk to you about 3 specific signs that you might be mentally tired. Not just physically, because recognizing these signs might be the first step toward healing. The first sign is when you start to lose interest in the things that once brought you joy. I'm not talking about quitting a hobby because of arthritis, or giving up golf because of a bad hip. I'm talking about that deep disinterest, where things that used to make your heart light up now feel like chores. I met Raymond, a 72-year-old gentleman from Colorado Springs, who used to build model ships with every Saturday for 30 years. He'd sit by his window with his tools, working for hours with jazz music playing in the background. But last year he packed all his supplies into boxes and left the shelf empty. When I asked him why, he said, "I just don't see the point anymore. It doesn't excite me. It's like something inside me turned off." Raymond wasn't sick, wasn't in physical pain, but he was mentally worn down. His wife had passed 3 years earlier, and he hadn't realized how much grief had drained his emotional energy. That quiet disinterest was his mind's way of saying, "I'm overloaded." And it's not laziness, it's not being unmotivated, it's mental exhaustion, and it's real. The second sign is when small decisions start to feel like big ones. Things that used to be automatic, like what to eat for breakfast or whether to answer the phone, suddenly take up way too much space in your head. I met a woman named Bernice, 76 years old, living outside Manchester, England. She told me one morning she stood in her kitchen staring at her pantry for 15 minutes, frozen, because she couldn't decide whether to make toast or porridge. She laughed it off when she told me, but then her smile faded. She said, "It's happening more often. It's like my brain just stalls." Now, Bernice had no sign of dementia. Her memory tests were fine, but her doctor explains she was suffering from what's called decision fatigue, a real mental strain that builds up when we're carrying too much unspoken stress. Bernice had recently taken over her finances after her husband passed. She was handling bills, dealing with insurance, and feeling completely alone in it all. All of that weighed on her, silently, until even breakfast became a burden. That's how mental fatigue sneaks in. It takes the ordinary and makes it feel overwhelming. The third sign is emotional numbness. You're surrounded by people, but you feel nothing. It's like you're watching your own life through a window. I once spoke to Walter, a Korean War veteran in his 80s who attended the same senior group for years. He used to lead the music sessions, always the first to tell a joke, always lighting up the room. Then one day he stopped showing up. When I finally visited him, I asked if he was okay. He sat there in his recliner, looking out the window, and said, "I still love people, I just don't feel like I'm part of the world anymore. It's like everything's happening far away, and I'm not really needed in it." That right there, that sentence, hit me like a brick. Because I knew what he meant. He wasn't sad in the crying sense. He wasn't angry or bitter. He was just disconnected. That kind of emotional fatigue often comes after years of pushing through life without pausing to process pain, grief, or even loneliness. Walter had spent so long being strong for others, he didn't realize his own heart had gone quiet. And when your emotional battery runs dry, it's not easy to just flip a switch. It takes intention, it takes care, and most of all, it takes acknowledgement. So those are the 3 signs: losing joy in what you love, struggling with simple decisions, and feeling emotionally cut off. These aren't just quirks of aging. These are signs your mind is saying, I need rest, I need healing, I need attention. And if any of these sound like you or someone you love, know this: you are not broken, you are not alone. And this is not the end. There is still so much life in you. We just have to learn how to refill what's been quietly draining for far too long. Now, let me take this a step further, because when we talk about mental tiredness in seniors, we're not just talking about losing interest or feeling disconnected. We're talking about the way it chips away at the very structure of your daily life, piece by piece, until one day you wake up and wonder where the days went. And it doesn't always come from trauma or illness. Sometimes it comes from too much over too long, like drops of water wearing down a stone. I met Evelyn in upstate New York. She was 81, lived alone since her husband passed, had 2 grown sons who visited occasionally. She was proud, fiercely independent. Every morning she still got dressed nice, sat at her kitchen table, made her own breakfast. But as we spoke, I noticed something in her voice, a softness that didn't used to be there. I asked her, "What's your favorite part of?" Because that's when my mind stopped spinning. That stuck with me, because when sleep becomes your favorite escape, not for rest, but for silence, that's not laziness, that's exhaustion on a level most people don't understand. Evelyn was still functioning, still polite, still present, but inside her mind was tired of holding everything together alone. She told me, "Some days I feel like I'm running a house, managing pills, keeping track of appointments, remembering birthdays, all for an audience of none." And you know what? That kind of quiet responsibility wears a person down more than any physical labor. That's a truth we don't talk about enough in elderly health. Let me give you another perspective. Sometimes mental tiredness hides behind smiles. Take Ron, 69, from New Jersey. He retired early after a career in sales. Outwardly, he had it all figured out. Great pension, hobbies lined up, no real health issues. But a year after retirement, his wife noticed something was off. He was snapping more, got impatient over small things, stopped calling his old friends. He didn't even want to play guitar anymore, something he loved since his teen. One night during dinner, she asked, "What's going on with you?" And he said, "I don't know. I thought this part of life was supposed to feel free, but all I feel is heavy, like I don't know what to do with myself anymore." And that right there, that loss of inner direction. See, when you've spent 40 years with a role, a purpose, a reason to get up every day, and suddenly that's gone, the silence can feel deafening. No meetings, no deadlines, no purpose waiting outside the front door. Just you, your thoughts, and time. And for many seniors, that transition is heavier than they ever expected. Ron wasn't depressed in the clinical sense, but he was untethered, unanchored, and that made his mind tired, restless, constantly searching for meaning in a space where routine used to live. Then there's the impact on relationships. Mental fatigue doesn't just affect how you feel about yourself. It changes how you show up for the people you love. I remember speaking to Clara, 75, who had been married for over 50 years. Her husband, George, told me, "She still talks to me, but it's like she's not really with me. I miss her even when she's sitting right next to me." And when I asked Clara about it privately, she said, "It's not that I don't love him, I do, but my brain feels like a foggy windshield. I can't focus, I can't feel things as deeply. I'm just tired." That's a kind of emotional drift that's hard to explain if you haven't felt it. It doesn't mean the love is gone. It just means the mental energy required to connect, to be present, to respond, has been stretched thin. And when that goes unspoken, it turns into resentment, distance, and guilt, all of which only make the fatigue worse. Now let's talk about another place where mental tiredness shows up, in the way we talk to ourselves. I've sat with enough elderly men and women to know this. The stories we tell ourselves shape the way you age. And when you're tired, mentally tired, those stories often turn negative. "I'm not needed anymore. I'm just slowing everyone down. I used to be useful, I used to matter. These aren't just passing thoughts. These are deeply rooted beliefs that grow stronger in silence. I had lunch once with a man named Louis, 73, a retired mechanic from California. Quiet man, hardworking, raised 4 kids, married nearly 5 decades. Over soup, he said to me, "I don't really talk much at family gatherings anymore. I feel like I'm just background now, like a photo on the wall. Nobody means harm, but you can feel when you become part of the furniture." I'll be honest with you, that broke my heart, because Louis still had so much to give, but the weight of years of being sidelined in a fast-moving world had exhausted his spirit. And that's what mental fatigue does. It tells you you're invisible even when you're not. It tells you to sit down and be quiet even when your voice still matters. And here's the final piece most people don't think about. Mental tiredness feeds itself when it's left alone. The less you engage, that's the dangerous loop I've seen in dozens of homes, dozens of hearts. It starts small, skipping the morning walk, ignoring phone calls, letting the dishes sit. Then it grows, weeks without real conversation. No plans, no spark, just floating. Not because you're lazy, but because your mind has forgotten how to look forward to things. That's why recognizing these signs is not just important, it's urgent. Because the longer we go without naming it, the deeper it digs in. And mental fatigue, if left unattended, doesn't just make life dull, it puts your whole well-being at risk. It weakens memory, it dulls emotions, it steals sleep, and it can even weaken your immune system. This isn't just about feeling tired, it's about staying alive, truly alive, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You know, the beautiful thing about getting older is that we still have the ability to change, even when we feel stuck. I've sat across from folks who thought they were done, thought the spark would never come back, thought this fog in their mind was just how the rest of life was going to feel. But I've seen that spark return, not all at once, but in quiet, steady ways. The first way out of mental fatigue is simple, but it's not easy. You've got to reconnect, not to the world out there, but to something small that means something to you. I remember Angela, 74, who told me she hadn't painted in over a decade. Her brushes sat in a box in the garage, untouched since her husband passed. One day her granddaughter asked her, "Grandlam, do you still know how to paint flowers?" And something in that question cracked her open. She went into that garage, opened the box, pulled out the old brushes and just stared at them. Then she whispered, "Let's see if I still remember." That first painting didn't turn out great, but it wasn't about the painting. It was about remembering that there's still something inside you that wants to express, not impress. And that's a life lesson we often forget. Elderly wisdom isn't about telling people how to live. It's about remembering how to come alive. Another path to healing comes through rhythm, creating small routines that give your brain a break from constant decision-making. Harold, the vet I told you about earlier, started every morning writing one sentence in a journal. At first it was just, "Didn't sleep well," or "Had toast." But over time it became a way to process feelings he didn't even know he had. It's like clearing out mental clutter, he told me. It makes room for better thoughts to come in. When the brain knows what to expect, even in the smallest way, it begins to calm. Routine isn't boring, it's medicine for a tired mind. Now I know not everyone can run a marathon, but even the smallest movement can stir something awake inside. I remember Felix, 80, who lived in a small town in Oregon. One day he told his daughter, "I feel like a parked car. The engine still works, but it's been sitting so long I don't know how to get going." She laughed and said, "Then let's just back you out of the driveway." And they started walking, just around the block, every day, rain or shine. And he told me a month later, that walk saved me. Not because of the steps, but because I finally felt like I was part of the world again. And that's it, isn't it? Mental tiredness makes you feel separate. Movement reconnects you. It reminds you you're still here. And the last lesson is this: talk to someone, not because you need advice, but because your mind needs to hear itself out loud. Loneliness isn't just about being alone. It's about not being heard. Clara, the woman who felt emotionally flat in her marriage, began doing something simple. Once a week, she'd sit with a neighbor and talk about books. That was it. No therapy, no pressure, just stories. And after a few weeks, she told me, "It's strange, I feel like I'm remembering how to feel again. And that's the secret. When we stop talking, we stop processing. When we stop processing, we get stuck. And when we're stuck too long, the mind gets tired. But when we speak, even awkwardly, even clumsily, our thoughts find air. And with air comes healing. So if anything I said today feels familiar, if you've been feeling a little lost in your own thoughts, or you've watched someone you love slowly fade into silence, just know, this doesn't have to be your story's final chapter. There's always more life, more love, more you left to live. And sometimes all it takes is a small step, a quiet routine, or one honest conversation to begin again. That's what Elderly Reflections are all about. Not just looking back, but learning how to move forward, one moment at a time. If this message touched you in any way, do me a favor, like this video, subscribe for more stories like this, and maybe even share it with someone who needs to hear it. And before you go, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments below. Whether it's a small town in Georgia, a flat in Dublin, or a cottage in British Columbia, your presence here matters, your story matters, and you're not alone.